Today, I'm here to do an interview with Dr. Vijay Singh, who's here to talk about how he got involved with winemaking. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, my pleasure.
You are a biochemical engineer and worked in pharma. Tell me a little bit about your background.
I was always interested in how things work, and I became an engineer. I did a chemical engineering degree, and during which I really got involved with biology and fermentation. So that was kind of my specialization. I worked for pharma for many years. I had my own company selling a very unique piece of equipment called a wave bioreactor. We did fermentation. I retired in 2007, and a friend of ours convinced us to grow wine, plant grapes, and so on. And in a few years, we had grapes. And then I asked him what to do. And he said, well, make wine. And I looked at winemaking technology and I was appalled. It was so messy, expensive, involved mostly cleaning. It was, as my friend said, 90% janitorial and 10% winemaking. So I thought to myself, I'm a fermentation specialist. I could figure out a better way to make wine because wine is really a fermentation. You take sugar in the grapes and you ferment it to alcohol. And so I get involved in using my background and into winemaking.
So, your training and career was in fermentation. Would you say that winemaking is fermentation?
Of course, winemaking is fermentation. We take a sugar and we mysteriously convert it to alcohol. Our friend the yeast does all this for us. And there's engineering involved in how to make the wine perfect. You need to make sure it's clean, you need to make sure it's the right temperature. It's a fermentation engineering dream.
So, how did you learn specific winemaking skills?
Well, the basic skills of fermentation I knew because that was my training. I didn't know enough about wine in itself. The traditional, the classic ways, the way you got certain flavors. So I joined the UC Davis online course, which is about 3 years. I think it's about 6 semesters. And I learned some of the intricacies and specific issues that were involved with winemaking.
What about formal wine tasting training, and what is your advice to winemakers?
I never had official wine training. I was very fortunate. My wife, who's an artist, volunteered to become a sommelier. So she went all the way to level 3 WSET. These are the gods. They can tell you which side of the river the wine came from and so forth. So I relied on her to provide me with the validation that what I was making was actually good. If you make wine in your house, you have no idea what's any good. You have to either enter in competition or get the formal training to understand the winemaking. So my advice to winemakers is you really need to get some formal wine tasting education or have somebody that works with you that can provide that because you have no idea what you're making, whether it's good or bad. It all tastes good to me. That is not a criteria to make a world-class wine.
So, what can you tell winemakers about tradition versus innovation?
This is a question we often wrestle with. I have people come to me and say, well, you make wine in plastic bags and it's automated and it's not winemaking. But tradition is not always better. We don't use glass syringes anymore. That was tradition. Wine made in Roman times tasted awful, which is why they put cinnamon sticks and honey and all kinds of things into it to make it actually drinkable. So winemaking, like anything, is a process. And a process can be modernized to improve cleanliness, to improve taste, yet you can retain the classical techniques. So it's a misconception that wine made in a urn is going to be better than wine made in a stainless steel tank. It's how it's made. It's how the yeast were handled, how the temperature is controlled, and like any food product, ice cream today tastes better than ice cream made 100 years ago because it's made in a very precise, controlled way. So my advice to winemakers is don't shun innovation because it's new. Look at the taste. Ultimately, you're making a product that has to taste a certain way. Nobody really cares how it's made. It's a marketing thing that you made wine in this wooden oak barrel and therefore it must taste better than something made in a stainless tank. Not true at all. We have to look at the end product. How you got there is really nobody's interest.
So, what makes the Go Fermenter so different, and why do you think the wines made in the Go Fermenter are better?
The initial idea behind the Go Fermenter was labor saving. As I mentioned my wife from the previous discussion, she doesn't like to clean things, and neither do I. So part of the issue was to make something that didn't require cleaning. It used a single-use disposable liner, so it was no need to clean. But we discovered serendipitously that it made better wine. And there are two major things why this is so. And it took us many years to actually discover this. Firstly, our wine in the Go Fermenter is made in a sealed liner. So there's no way for air to get in. So there's no way for the wine to oxidize. We are one of the very few wineries that can make completely sulfite-free wines reliably. The second thing we discovered was that every other wine-making apparatus in the world has one great failure. They don't mix the must while it's fermenting. The Italians, with their foot stomping, they actually had to figure it out. By stomping the grapes with their feet, they were actually mixing up the fermenting must, extracting the flavors out better, and more importantly, the temperature was uniform. We did some experiments a year or so ago, and we discovered to our amazement that in conventional wine fermenters, there was as much as a 10-degree difference in temperature between the top of the fermentation and the bottom. Now, yeast are very sensitive to temperature. This kind of gradient will give you all kind of off flavors and sulfurous odors. In our system, because we have this pneumatic bag that squeezes automatically on a periodic basis, we have a uniform temperature. And this turned out to be the most interesting aspect of the Go Fermenter. We are the only wine fermenter in the world that can mix. The reason is, it's very hard to mix must. You can't put a propeller in there. It's like mixing mud. But when you squeeze it with the bag, it's like squeezing a toothpaste tube. It has no way to resist it. It has to move. So those are the two issues I think that make the Go Fermenter a unique device, and that's why it makes such high quality wine.
How do you think your chemical engineering training lent itself to the Go Fermenter concept and its uniqueness?
I think a lot of winemakers are empirically trained. They learned on the job, they did an apprenticeship, and a lot of what they do is based on their experience. I was trained as an engineer. I know heat transfer. I know how much heat is generated, how to cool it. I know mass transfer. I know how to get oxygen into something, how to get CO2 out of something. I can calculate all these things. So my background allows me to approach the problem from a process standpoint and design equipment that achieves a certain purpose, not some rote method. You know, I don't run a fermentation under a full moon at midnight because that's the only way I got a good flavor. I use science to make something that's reproducible, not just for me, but for our customers. It's stupid simple to operate because it works on fundamental chemical principles.
What do you think is your most unique skill?
I think that my most unique skill is I am one of the few generalists. I can take things in different fields and combine them in a way that a specialist wouldn't know what to do. For example, I do all my own programming. All our equipment is programmed, are done by myself because I know how to program, and by designing the program for the fermentation, I make something that is precisely tailored to the fermentation. The same thing with other work I do. I know about fermentation, I know about engineering. I don't know everything about these fields. I'm not the greatest expert in fermentation, but I know enough to combine that with programming and in manufacturing and plastics and liners and oxygen diffusion. So I think it's this generalistic ability to synthesize new solutions from other fields that don't normally interact.
So, you are an inventor. How many patents do you have, and which are the most interesting?
I think I have about 24 or 25, I don't know, and a couple are still, we're fighting with the patent office because that's half the fun. The thing is, they're very diverse. I have patents in gun sights, biotech, fermentation, hydroponics. I like to solve problems in a different way. Some of my patents, like for example, the Wave Biotech patent, is very interesting because I actually remember going to a hospital where they were using our equipment to treat children who had cancer. And our machines were actually run on the bedside to grow stem cells to actually treat these children. And that was kind of very heartwarming feeling to see something that made a difference to kids. I have a patent for a gun sight, which I really find very interesting. It's a way of using lasers in a way that you can use it for a close assault weapon. So again, different facets of things. We're currently working a lot on robotics in the vineyard, and there are a number of patents that are going to come out of that. And of course, the Go fermenter has a number of patents, and there's a story there I think that you might find interesting. My father is a writer. Unfortunately, he passed away about a month ago, but he was a writer, and all his life he thought that I was nothing but a glorified mechanic, because in his opinion, the only instrument a human being needed was a pen. So he never really had much of an appreciation for my inventing abilities. But a few years ago, our winemaking machine was given a French patent. So I called him up and I said, Dad, you know, I got a French patent for winemaking. And he goes, well, you know, the French, they know how to make wine. They've been doing it for centuries. And, you know, that's pretty impressive. They got a wine patent for the French. So that was kind of a vindication and great fun from a patent standpoint.
What are you working on now?
Well, you know, we've been doing a lot of work, obviously, on the Go fermenter for winemaking. Right now, we're working on actually blending. And people don't appreciate the importance of blending in making a fine wine. No wine is really made as a straight varietal. So we're making a machine that helps wineries blend. And also, we are looking to put it in restaurants. So you can actually go to a restaurant and blend your own wine and learn something about it and have some fun too. Also, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of work is going on into robotics for vineyards. I think that the lack of labor to work in vineyards is going to become much worse. And so we really need to look at making small, inexpensive equipment that can spray, that can harvest, that can do a lot of the vineyard operations. But again, you know, I'm always intrigued by a problem. I'm essentially a hacker. I'll buy something and I'll take it apart and see if I can make it a little better. And sometimes a patent comes out of it and it becomes a product. Sometimes it makes money, most times it's not. Remember, it's 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration or success. But look, it's all about having fun. And I can say one thing, I am really having a great time in my life. I'm having fun, and I really appreciate you listening to my story, and hopefully you found it interesting, maybe an inspiration to somebody. But anyway, please drink our wine, go on our website, and stay happy.